Hey, who likes DRM? Anybody? Raise your hands. You like DRM? It's shit. It's terrible. DRM should die in a fire. Skip it up and that up. What does DRM stand for? Question mark.
Digital Rights Management. According to Searchio TechTarget, digital rights management is a systematic approach to copyright protection for digital media.
So basically, DRM is a weak-ass attempt for companies to keep you from pirating their shit. But there are two major problems with DRM. One being the fact that it's very easily crackable, or even if it's not easily crackable, someone always figures out a way to circumvent it, so it's a waste of time. And two, if a company goes out of business that created the DRM and you have a game that utilizes their DRM, you may not have access to it. And that's exactly what happened with people who purchased the Mac version of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. The whopping 3 of you that did. Unlike the hot garbage that is Metal Gear Survive, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is an awesome spin-off of the Metal Gear series that is developed by Platinum Games, and it's more action-oriented. It's not stealth at all. It's very similar to Bayonetta in how it plays. Now, I didn't even know there was a Mac version of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, but the company that ported it over to the Mac was Trans Gaming. Trans Gaming developed the port, and they decided to include a constant online kind of DRM where you have to be connected to the internet to play the game. Well, here's the good news. Trans Gaming is long gone. The studio has shut down. So if you own the Mac version of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, guess what? You can't play the game. You don't have access to it, even though you bought it. Now, what's interesting is if you go to the Steam page, it no longer says that Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is compatible with Macintosh computers. So if you were one of the few people that bought the game for the Mac, you have a useless copy of the game unless you go out and pirate it and circumvent the DRM. Isn't it great to not have legitimate access to something you used your hard-earned money to play and enjoy? Isn't it just wonderful? I cannot for the life of me fathom why companies waste their time with DRM. I mean, I know why, and I'm going to explain it, but it's always circumvented and it's always cracked. And all it does is piss off the consumer and make them hate the company that implemented the DRM. I remember a couple years back, everyone was singing Denuvo's praises, saying, oh, it's the ultimate DRM, no one can crack it. And eventually people did, like a couple months after games came out. And now games within days of release, if they use Denuvo, they're being cracked. Everyone sung Denuvo's praises and said it was the ultimate DRM. And now it's completely useless. People can hack and crack through it in 24 hours and pirate games utilizing Denuvo DRM. It's an absolute waste of time. But DRM makes the industry happy and it makes investors happy. You have to understand, people that invest in companies, they're out of touch, they're older, they have a lot of money, they don't understand how technology works, and they want to protect the intellectual properties to make sure they get the biggest return on their investment, and they don't want to hear it. They don't understand it. They can't wrap their mind around that DRM can easily be cracked. It just makes them sleep better at night. And it isn't just video games, man. This DRM and copyright management systems have gone on forever. When VHS tapes were first becoming mainstream and they were being released on the market, I remember the Motion Picture Association of America was losing their minds thinking that people are just going to record all their movies and get bootleg copies of VCR tapes or VHS tapes, and that's it. We're done. Hollywood is going to implode. And if anything, VHS tapes and pre-recorded VCR tapes were one of the biggest moneymakers for Hollywood ever. It was a huge cash cow for them, and them freaking out was over nothing. But do you think they learned from that? Nope. They did the same thing when DAT tapes came out, which are digital audio tapes. The reason the record industry freaked out over those is because they were a lossless format.
They see this little tape as a big problem, because even though it's half the size of standard audio cassettes, the sound rivals that of compact discs. It's called the DAT, Digital Audio Tape Recorder. The key word here is digital. The DAT can make recordings almost equal in quality to original master tapes, something until now possible only in recording studios.
They actually had superior audio quality to CDs, and record executives' faces were melting off thinking, oh my God, people are just gonna record CDs onto DAT tapes and digitally transfer them, and then they're gonna bootleg them on the streets, and the recording industry is gonna implode. So they stifled the DAT format, which was an amazing format. And then they put this stupid system in place called SCMS, which stands for Serial Copyright Management System. So what would happen was, say you had a CD player and it had a coaxial digital out or a toss link out, a optical audio out, and you put it into a DAT player or a DAT recorder, it would only let you record one copy of that CD onto a DAT tape. So then if you try to go from the digital out of the DAT recorder that you recorded the CD onto into another DAT recorder to make another copy of that DAT tape, it wouldn't let you. The SCMS would come into play and disable you from doing that. But it was so painfully simple to circumvent that. All you had to do was you get your CD player, you use the analog stereo out, the left to right analog, the red and the white jacks, okay? You get the audio output, put it into the DAT player, get nice solid gold RCA cables that are nice and clean, make sure your audio levels are fine. That circumvents the SCMS because you're not recording digitally, you're recording it analog. There was virtually no difference in the sound quality so long as you didn't put the gain up too high that it distorted. And then that DAT tape that you used, that you recorded from the CD analog, all you had to do is take that DAT tape, put it in a DAT player, go from the optical audio output of the DAT player into another DAT player, and you would just be able to bootleg your DAT tapes that way or make copies of your DAT tapes that way, and they would sound virtually no different. They wouldn't sound different at all, actually, especially if you really tweak the audio levels and make sure the gain was as high as it could be without distorting. And then you could make 1 billion copies of that DAT tape simply by recording the original CD through the analog output as opposed to the digital audio output. That was it. They freaked out. They needed to have this SCMS in place, and it was easily circumvented. And they did the same thing with VHS tapes. I know I'm going on a rant right now about copyright management systems. They had something in place that if you try to copy a pre-recorded movie and you just plugged into another VCR, you took the video and audio out from one VCR and put it into another, there would be like a rainbow banding effect. It wouldn't copy it properly. That was the copyright management system that was in VCR tapes. There was just boxes made that would circumvent that. You would take the output of the one VCR you were trying to copy the movie from, plug it into this box. This box would strip that copyright system out, and then you would just take the output of that box, put it into the other VCR, and dump your VCR tapes that way from the pre-recorded movie, and it would look fine. I had one of them back in the day when I was like 13. But even though we've been down this road 1 billion times and every single copyright management system, whether it be with DAT tapes or video games, has been circumvented, these dumbass investors, these out-of-touch old men with a lot of money, want them in place, and they will just keep shoehorning this DRM in because it makes them feel better. It makes them feel like they'll get a better return on their investment, even though it won't. It's been proven 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times that it won't. Now, on top of all that, the people who are very anti-game streaming and digital distribution have a very valid point. Rich, look at what happened with Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance on the Mac. What happens if old games become digital distribution and Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo go out of business and I don't have access to my games anymore? You got a good point. I don't have an answer for you on that one. And having the physical copies of games, though, and I'll refute that with this, isn't a solution either, because you guys know as soon as you get a game home, there's huge patches that you have to download. So say Sony goes out of business anyway, and you have a bunch of their first-party IPs on Blu-rays for the PS4 or PS5 or whatever. Just because you have the disc doesn't mean you actually have the game. If you don't have access to that patch because Sony is gone and they're out of business, that disc is nothing more than a coaster for my coffee. So I don't know what the solution is. I don't know, and say, for example, a digital distribution service goes out of business. Steam, they say that, if we go out of business, you'll be able to download the games and keep them on your hard drive, which, fine, but that may not be everybody, okay? And what happens if another digital distribution service like Origin, for example, they close up shop from EA, which could happen, and I don't have access to my games anymore? That sucks. And even if we go where everything is cloud gaming and we're just paying a monthly fee from a company and they go out of business, okay, yeah, we're just paying that monthly fee to have access to their service to play games, but what happens if that's the only way we have access to those games? What happens to the games I enjoyed playing even though I was just paying a monthly service and I just can't play them anymore? That sucks too. So before we just straight up go into this digital future, things like with this would happen with Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance on the Mac, where the company goes out of business and the DRM is now keeping people from playing a game that they rightfully purchased. These things need to be addressed. They need to be prevented, because when we hear about things like this, I'm sure not many people bought Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance for the Mac. but it makes people very concerned. And if this happens on a much larger scale where a major company goes out of business and people don't have access to a very popular game that many people purchased, people are gonna be pissed off. And before we go into this straight up digital future, things like this need to be addressed and prevented, or else there's gonna be a big problem in the gaming industry. This is Rich of Review Tech USA signing out. Have a good one.